The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor with a sound too sharp to be accidental. It cracked through the celestial ballroom like a gunshot, slicing cleanly through 600 conversations at once. Music died mid-note. Laughter froze on lips. Heads turned in unison toward the grand staircase as glass skittered outward in a glittering halo. Mia stood at the center of the stairs, her hand still extended from the throw, fingers trembling not from fear but from fury. The red Valentino gown clung to her like a declaration. It was the kind of dress people remembered, the kind people whispered about afterward. Her dark hair was swept back from her face, exposing eyes that burned with something raw and unfiltered. Hurt, yes. Rage, absolutely. But also resolve. The kind that comes when someone decides they are done being careful. At the bottom of the staircase stood Derek. Champagne dripped slowly from the shoulder of his Brioni suit, soaking into fabric that cost more than most people's rent. He didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't raise his voice or signal to the men positioned subtly along the walls, men whose posture alone marked them as something other than guests. He simply stood there, still as stone, looking up at her as if the room belonged to him and this was merely an interruption. 600 phones began to rise. "You absolute bastard," Mia said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. The acoustics of the ballroom had been designed for orchestras and opera. Tonight they served her instead. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was stupid enough to never look?" A ripple passed through the crowd. People glanced at one another, at Derek, at the security team waiting for a signal that never came. This wasn't how things went when someone challenged him. Everyone in that room knew it. Senators had lowered their voices in his presence. Prosecutors took his calls. Men twice Mia's age had apologized for less. Derek lifted a white pocket square and wiped his cheek with deliberate calm. His eyes never left her face. They were dark, unreadable, the color of smoke hanging in still air. "Mia," he said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Privately?" She laughed, sharp and brittle, and the sound scraped along the nerves of everyone listening. "Now you want privacy? After what you did? After you used me? After you lied to every single person in this room about who you are and what you wanted?" She descended a few steps, heels clicking against marble. The sound echoed, slow and measured, each step a challenge. She could see it now, the faint tension at the corner of his jaw, the smallest crack in the mask. It thrilled her. Good. Let him feel this. She turned from him and addressed the crowd instead, lifting her arms slightly as if conducting them. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "let me tell you about Derek, the man you admire, the man you fund, the man you invite into your homes and your institutions." A hush fell, thick and electric. The generous donor, the patron of the arts, the man who gave $10 million to the Metropolitan Museum last year and sits on the boards of 3 children's hospitals. She paused, letting it land. "He's been using my gallery to launder money from his criminal enterprises." Gasps broke out like sparks. Someone swore softly. A woman near the front covered her mouth. "Every painting I authenticated, every sale I facilitated, every auction I curated." Mia's voice tightened just enough to sound vulnerable, not weak. "I was unknowingly helping him move stolen art and dirty money through legitimate channels. He made me complicit in crimes I didn't even know I was committing." She pulled a stack of papers from her clutch and flung them at Derek's feet. They scattered across the marble, certificates and transaction records sliding and overlapping like fallen cards. "I've turned everything over to the FBI," she said. "Every email, every document, every lie." The room felt like it was holding its breath. Mia didn't see the smile that curved Derek's lips as she turned away. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. 6 months earlier, the Castellani Gallery had been quiet in a way that felt sacred. Morning light spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, washing over exposed brick and polished concrete. The air smelled faintly of oil paint and old wood. Mia moved slowly through the space, coffee cooling forgotten on her desk as she examined a canvas beneath her magnifying glass. At 26, She was already the youngest art authentication specialist in the city, with credentials strong enough that insurers trusted her word without question. She hadn't come from money. She'd come from long nights, student loans, and a mentor who believed integrity mattered more than profit. Dr. Harrison had taught her that. The gallery had been his life's work. When he retired to Florence, he'd left it to her without hesitation. Guard it, he'd told her. Not just the art, the reputation. She lived by that. So when her assistant knocked and said a man named Derek wanted to see her without an appointment, she'd said no without looking up. When the assistant returned, pale and uncertain, and said the man wanted to buy the Castellani collection, Mia had finally raised her head. The Castellani collection wasn't just valuable. It was untouchable. 15 Renaissance paintings carried out of Europe during the war, preserved through generations, displayed for students and scholars. The soul of the gallery. She told the assistant to send him in. Derek hadn't looked like what she expected. No entourage, no flashy jewelry, just a perfectly tailored black suit, open collar, dark hair slightly too long, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they touched. He spoke calmly. He listened. He didn't push when she said no. He pointed out flaws in her security system she hadn't noticed yet. Mentioned a forgery technique she'd been planning to test later that week. When he left, he didn't threaten. He simply said, "You'll call me." She should have thrown his card away. She didn't. The break-in happened 2 nights later. 2 figures, masks, precise movements. 3 paintings gone in under 2 minutes. Not the Castellani collection. Never the Castellani collection. Almost as if someone wanted to prove a point without crossing a line. Mia arrived to flashing lights and shattered glass, heart pounding hard enough to make her dizzy. Relief nearly dropped her to her knees when she saw the collection untouched. That night, shaking and exhausted, she called the number on the card. Derek answered on the second ring. He didn't gloat. He didn't ask for anything. He sent security within 20 minutes and told her to rest. No obligations, he said, and that was how it started. Protection that felt like kindness. Help that arrived before she asked. Answers before she voiced the questions. Coincidences stacked neatly, plausibly, until they no longer felt like coincidences at all. Mia told herself she was being careful. She told herself she was in control. And 6 months later, standing in the center of a ballroom full of people who believed her without question, she had no idea that every step she'd taken toward him had been carefully measured. That the silence he held while she destroyed him was not restraint. It was patience. Understood. Straight narrative, no headings, no meta, no labels. I'll stretch this section slowly and deliberately, letting the erosion happen almost invisibly, so by the end the danger feels normal and unavoidable. This is the long middle where comfort replaces fear. Here we go. By the end of the first week, the Castellani gallery no longer felt like Mia's alone. The changes came quietly at first. New cameras installed overnight, smaller than the old ones, nearly invisible against brick and steel. Motion sensors calibrated so precisely they could distinguish between footsteps and settling wood. Keycard access points added to doors she'd never thought to question before. Derek never asked permission. He never framed it as a takeover. He spoke as if it were inevitable, necessary, obvious. "This is standard," he said, watching technicians work with practiced ease. "You were exposed. You don't want to be again." She told herself he was right. Marcus remained stationed in the gallery long after the insurance paperwork cleared. Then James joined him. Then another man whose name she never caught, rotating in on 12-hour shifts. They were respectful, unobtrusive, always just far enough away to pretend they weren't listening. Customers noticed. Collectors commented. Dealers nodded with something that looked suspiciously like approval. Word traveled fast in the art world. Faster than gossip, faster than money. People whispered that the Castellani gallery was protected now. That Mia had aligned herself with someone who didn't lose. The phone started ringing more often. Collectors who had once brushed her off suddenly wanted consultations. Private viewings. Quiet advice. Dealers invited her to backroom showings she hadn't known existed. Museum boards returned her emails within hours instead of weeks. Her calendar filled so quickly she had to hire another assistant just to manage appointments. Every success came with Derek's shadow just behind it. He never demanded credit, never asked to be introduced as anything other than a partner. But his presence lingered in every interaction. His name opened doors Mia hadn't even knocked on yet. His approval, spoken casually over dinner or texted late at night, carried weight she pretended not to notice. She told herself this was how powerful alliances worked. The warehouse reveal happened on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after the break-in. Derek didn't frame it as a dramatic moment. He didn't warn her or soften the blow. He simply gave her an address and told her to come alone. Marcus met her at the door, ushered her inside without a word. Mia stopped walking the moment she crossed the threshold. The space was vast, warm, deliberately lit. Exposed brick softened by wood floors and carefully positioned lights. And the art. The walls were alive with it. A Caravaggio she recognized instantly. A Monet listed as missing for decades. A Rembrandt that had vanished from a private collection in Amsterdam years ago. Her breath caught painfully in her chest. "This is stolen art," she said, the words barely louder than a whisper. Derek stood beside her, hands in his pockets, gaze reverent as he looked at the paintings. "Some of it," he said. "Most of it." She turned on him, shock giving way to something sharp and panicked. "You can't just, these pieces belong in museums. They're evidence. They're locked in vaults," he interrupted calmly. "Used as leverage. Treated like financial instruments instead of cultural artifacts." He walked slowly along the wall, gesturing as he spoke. "That one was collateral for a loan. That one was hidden in a basement because the heirs didn't want to pay inheritance tax. That one was stolen during the war and sold 5 times before I acquired it." "You stole it," Mia said. "I bought it," he corrected. "From people who had possession, not ownership. There's a difference." She wanted to argue. She wanted to walk out. Instead, she found herself stepping closer to a Vermeer she had only ever seen in books, studying the brushwork, the light, the impossible delicacy of it. "It deserves to be seen," Derek said softly. "Not buried." That was the first crack. He didn't ask her to authenticate anything that night. He didn't ask for help. He let her walk through the collection at her own pace, answering questions when she asked, never pushing. He framed everything as a problem he wanted to solve, not a crime he was committing. "I want to return them," he said eventually. Quietly, carefully, the right way. She knew what he meant. The right way wasn't legal. It was plausible. Mia didn't agree, not out loud, but she didn't refuse either. The first time she bent a rule, it felt small enough to justify. Provenance details smoothed over. A gap explained with language that suggested uncertainty rather than fabrication. She told herself museums did this all the time. That history was messy. That truth in the art world was often reconstructed rather than discovered. Derek never rushed her. He let her set the pace, offered resources, archives, researchers. When doubts crept in, he listened patiently. "You're doing this for the art," he reminded her. "Not for me." The FBI whispers started around the same time. Sophia mentioned it first casually over lunch. "People are asking questions," she said. "About Derek. About you." Mia shrugged it off, laughing a little too quickly. "They always do." But the questions kept coming. An insurance adjuster lingered longer than necessary. A museum board member asked pointedly about her partnership. A man she didn't recognize attended 3 gallery events in a row and never spoke to anyone. Each time Derek had an answer. "They're fishing. They don't have anything. Visibility makes people nervous." He said it with such confidence that her anxiety faded almost instantly every time. His calm wrapped around her like a shield. She stopped jumping at shadows. Stopped questioning the men stationed in her gallery. Stopped noticing how often Derek seemed to know things before she told him. Her friends noticed. "You're different," Sophia said one night, studying her over a glass of wine. "You sound like him." Mia bristled. That's ridiculous. Is it? You talk about risk like it's abstract. Like consequences only happen to other people. Mia didn't answer. The security became tighter, more discreet. Her phone synced automatically with systems she hadn't installed herself. Derek framed it as convenience, efficiency, safety. You're not losing control, he said when she finally voiced her discomfort. You're gaining peace of mind. And she was. She slept better knowing someone else was watching the doors. She worked faster without the constant fear of another break-in. She stopped flinching at unfamiliar footsteps. The danger didn't disappear. It simply stopped feeling urgent. The night she authenticated the Raphael, her hands shook only briefly. She recognized it immediately. Stolen. Famous. Irreplaceable. Derek watched her closely as she worked, saying nothing, giving her space. It's real, she said finally. I know, he replied. The question is whether you can make it believable. She hesitated, then nodded. The donation made headlines. Praise poured in. Mia was called brilliant, courageous, ethical. A rising star who had helped restore cultural history. No one asked how the painting had surfaced. That was when the pride set in. Pride in outsmarting a broken system. Pride in succeeding where institutions failed. Pride in being trusted by someone powerful enough to change things. Unease followed close behind. It showed up late at night, when the gallery was quiet and the security monitors glowed softly in her office. When she caught Derek watching her instead of the art. When she realized she hadn't made a major decision alone in months. She thought distantly that this couldn't possibly end well. And then she locked the gallery, walked past the men guarding it, and went home feeling safer than she ever had. Which was how the danger finally won. Understood. Straight dump, continuous narrative, no labels, no breaks for structure. I'll let this section tighten, constrict, and accelerate so the slow burn collapses into crisis. This is where safety turns into a trap. Here it is. The gala was supposed to be a victory lap. For weeks, Mia told herself that if she could just get through this one night, everything would finally settle. The donations would be public. The partnerships would be official. The Castellani Gallery would step fully into a new tier of legitimacy that couldn't be questioned anymore. The invitations alone had taken months to curate. Politicians, museum directors, private collectors whose names were never printed anywhere. The ballroom at the Grand Aurelian had been booked under a foundation name Derek controlled, one that carried just enough prestige to feel inevitable rather than conspicuous. On the afternoon of the event, Mia stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, barely recognizing the woman reflected back at her. The dress hung perfectly, tailored within an inch of its life. The necklace Derek had sent sat cool and heavy against her collarbone. Antique diamonds arranged in a way that suggested inheritance rather than excess. She should have refused it. Instead, she slipped it on and told herself it was temporary. At the venue, everything moved too fast. Staff swarmed. Security checkpoints appeared where none had been planned. Derek's men blended seamlessly with hotel personnel. Their presence explained away as additional coverage requested by donors. Mia felt oddly distant, as if she were watching her own life unfold from a few steps behind her body. When Derek arrived, he kissed her cheek lightly, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "You did this," he murmured. "Tonight is yours." Applause followed her everywhere. Compliments stacked up until they lost meaning. People spoke her name with reverence now. She caught fragments of conversation drifting past her. Words like visionary, integrity, future. She smiled until her face ached. The speech went perfectly. She spoke about preservation, responsibility, cultural memory. She thanked donors without sounding grateful. She made ethics sound fashionable. When she finished, the room rose to its feet. She found Derek watching her from the edge of the crowd, expression unreadable. It was only afterward, tucked into a quiet lounge meant for private conversations, that her assistant found her. "I think there's a problem," the girl said, voice trembling. Mia took the folder without comment, flipping it open with practiced calm. First, nothing registered. Contracts, certificates, letters of donation. Then she saw her signature. Her stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling. Forgery was unmistakable when you knew your own hand. The loops were too wide. The pressure inconsistent. Close enough to pass a casual glance. Devastating under scrutiny. She flipped through page after page. Each one worse than the last. Each one tying her directly to acquisitions she had never seen, transactions she had never approved. Her name, her credentials, her reputation. This can't be right, she said faintly. The walls felt closer suddenly. The room too small. Music from the ballroom bled through the doors, muffled and distorted, like sound underwater. She found Derek within minutes. He listened as she spoke, his expression carefully neutral. When she finished, he didn't curse or react with shock. He simply nodded once. "Stay calm," he said. "Stay calm." Her voice rose despite herself. "Someone is framing me. I know. You know?" Panic sharpened into something closer to anger. "Then fix it." His hand closed around her wrist, firm but not painful. Grounding, controlling. "This is not the moment," he said quietly. "We're surrounded. Anything you do right now will be seen." She looked around and realized he was right. Every face felt too close, too attentive, too interested. The gala that had felt expansive an hour ago now pressed in on her from every side. Too many witnesses. "What do I do?" she whispered. "Nothing," Derek said. "Not yet." The word lodged in her chest like a splinter. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened just enough to remind her she couldn't. "Trust me," he added, his voice low. "I will handle it." Trust. The word tasted wrong now. She scanned the room, suddenly hyper-aware of every glance, every phone lifted, every whispered exchange. Had they already seen the documents? Were people watching her differently? Was this already over? She felt exposed, naked under chandeliers. When Derek released her, she didn't feel relieved. She felt managed. The night dragged on, each minute stretching thin. Mia moved through conversations on autopilot, smiling when expected, nodding when spoken to. Her mind raced ahead, constructing scenarios she couldn't stop. What if the FBI was already here? What if Derek was involved? What if this was the cost she'd been pretending didn't exist? She found herself watching Derek instead of the guests now, noticing how often people deferred to him, how security shifted subtly when he moved, how easily he controlled the rhythm of the room. This was his environment. She was just passing through it. By the time the champagne was poured for the final toast, Mia's hands were shaking openly. Derek noticed. He leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "remember that panic is what destroys credibility." She pulled away and looked at him, really looked this time, at the calm, at the certainty, at the absence of urgency. And for the first time since she'd met him, the thought landed with terrifying clarity. She wasn't sure whose side he was on. The applause began again, loud and overwhelming, swallowing her whole. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and Mia stood there, smiling into the light, knowing something had already gone terribly wrong, with no idea who she could trust to save her, if anyone at all. Got it. Straight dump, no labels, no signposting. This is the collapse of meaning, the moment everything she thought she understood is torn out by the roots. Long, heavy, disorienting. Here it is. They didn't approach her at the gala. That was the first mistake she made, thinking that if something catastrophic was about to happen, it would be loud, obvious, telegraphed. She half expected agents to emerge from the crowd, badges flashing, voices raised, the room erupting into spectacle. Instead, nothing happened. The night ended the way it was supposed to. Guests drifted out in clusters, flushed and satisfied. Donors shook hands. Promises were made. Mia smiled until her cheeks hurt, until the muscles felt numb, until she could no longer tell where the performance ended and she began. Derek walked her to the car himself. His hand rested lightly on her back, guiding, protective. The same gesture that had once comforted her now felt like a reminder of something she didn't want to name. "You did well," he said as the driver pulled away from the curb. "You held your composure." She stared out the window at the blur of streetlights. "Someone forged my signature." "Yes. And you're telling me to be patient." "Yes." Her fingers curled into the fabric of her dress. "Why?" There was a pause. Not hesitation, calculation. Derek leaned back in his seat, adjusting his cufflinks with deliberate care. "Because this isn't a problem that can be solved emotionally," he said. "And because you don't yet have all the information." That should have terrified her. Instead, exhaustion dulled the edge of fear, turning it into something heavier and more dangerous. Resignation. She didn't sleep that night, or the next. She replayed conversations, moments, gestures. Every reassurance took on a second meaning. Every coincidence sharpened into intent. The knock came 3 days later, just after noon. 2 people stood outside her apartment door. A man and a woman, both dressed plainly, both holding folders instead of weapons. They introduced themselves politely. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." Her knees nearly gave out. They didn't push past her. They didn't raise their voices. They asked if they could come in. Mia let them sit at her dining table, hands folded so tightly in her lap that her fingers ached. She answered questions carefully, choosing words the way she always did, with precision, with respect for truth. They listened. They took notes. They exchanged glances. Finally, the woman slid a photograph across the table. It was Derek. Not at a gala. Not in a museum. He stood in a warehouse, flanked by men whose posture she now recognized instantly. Cash visible on a table behind them. Crates stacked along the walls. His expression was calm, commanding. "Do you know who this man is?" the agent asked. Mia swallowed. "Yes." "Who do you believe him to be?" Her mouth opened, closed. The answer that came out sounded childish, naive. "A patron," she said. "A partner." The man exhaled slowly. "He's the head of an organized crime network operating across 3 countries. Art theft, money laundering, extortion. We've been building a case against him for 7 years. 7. The number rang in her skull like a bell. They laid it all out then. Not gently, not cruelly, just thoroughly. Names, dates, transactions, surveillance photos she had never seen, wiretaps she had unknowingly participated in. And her role, not accidental, not incidental, central. "You were credibility," the woman said. "Legitimacy, access." Mia's vision blurred. "He wouldn't. He cared about the art." "He cares about leverage," the agent replied. "Art is useful." The room felt too bright, too sharp, every sound amplified. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. "You're saying he used me?" "Yes." "You're saying everything I touched is poisoned?" "We're saying it was planned." They explained the investigation was nearing its end. That Derek knew it. That he'd been maneuvering for months, positioning assets, preparing contingencies. "And now," the man said carefully, "we believe he's setting the final stage." When they left, Mia sat alone at the table for a long time, staring at the faint ring left behind by a coffee mug. She didn't call Derek. He came to her instead. That night, he let himself into her apartment with a key she didn't remember giving him. He moved through the space like he belonged there, setting his jacket down, pouring himself a drink. She didn't ask how he knew. "You spoke to the FBI," he said. "It wasn't a question." "They told me everything," she replied, her voice flat. "About you." "Yes." No denial. No spin. "You used me," she said. The words tasted like blood. "I involved you," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." Her hands shook. "I trusted you. And that trust was real," he said. "On both sides." She laughed then, a broken, disbelieving sound. "You're a criminal. I'm a realist." She stood abruptly, pacing the room, anger finally cutting through the numbness. "You turned my life into camouflage. You destroyed my work." He watched her with an intensity that bordered on reverence. I elevated it. She spun on him. For what? So you could hide behind it. So I could finish, he said quietly. That was when he told her. The investigation, the pressure, the informants closing in, the need for an ending that didn't leave loose ends. He explained how visibility protected him until it didn't. How silence had become more dangerous than exposure. I needed a clean break, he said. One that would satisfy them. And one that would preserve what matters. What matters? She demanded. You. The word landed wrong. Twisted. You needed me to fall, she said slowly. Yes. The room tilted. Publicly, he continued. Completely. Without ambiguity. Understanding crept in like poison. The forged documents. The gala. The timing. You planned to ruin me. I planned to make you believable. The devastation hit all at once. A wave so total it left no room to breathe. Every memory fractured. Every kindness rewrote itself into manipulation. Or worse, something true twisted into something strategic. She pressed her palms to her temples, as if she could hold herself together by force. Was any of it real? She whispered. Derek didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Yes. That answer hurt more than any lie could have. Because it meant the love, the trust, the shared reverence for beauty and history. It had all existed. It had simply never been allowed to matter more than the plan. Mia slid down against the wall, the weight of it finally crushing her. She felt hollowed out, stripped of certainty, of identity, of the moral ground she'd built her life on. And somewhere beneath the devastation, a colder realization took hold. The story she thought she was living had never been hers. She had only just been told her role. He didn't try to help her up. That was the first thing she noticed. Derek had always been quick with small gestures, offering a hand, steadying her elbow, guiding her through crowded rooms. Now he stayed where he was, giving her space as if he knew that touching her would shatter whatever fragile restraint she had left. You're telling me, Mia said slowly, her voice scraped raw, that everything I thought was a betrayal was actually necessary. Yes. The word fell between them, heavy and final. She pushed herself to her feet, bracing one hand against the wall until the dizziness passed. Her mind kept replaying the night of the gala, every second now looping with new meaning. Her anger, her voice cracking, the way her hands had shaken when she threw the glass. You let me humiliate you, she said, in front of everyone. I needed you to, he replied. She stared at him, searching for irony, cruelty, anything that would make this simpler. There was none. His expression was grave, almost reverent, like a man describing a ritual rather than a crime. The Bureau doesn't trust performances, he continued. They trust pain. They trust loss. They trust people who have nothing left to gain. Her heart thudded painfully. So you took everything from me. I put you in a position where you could take everything from me, he said. Publicly, irreversibly. She shook her head, a hollow laugh tearing free. You could have warned me. No, he said immediately. If you had known, it would have shown. Your anger would have been careful. Your words would have been edited. They would have doubted you. Mia's stomach twisted as memories sharpened. The way her voice had risen without control. The heat behind her eyes. The way she hadn't been acting at all. You needed me to believe I was ruined, she said quietly. Yes. So my rage was real. Yes. So my humiliation had to be absolute, he finished. She felt sick. Images flickered through her mind, reframed and reordered. Derek standing silently as phones rose. Security not intervening. His refusal to stop her, even when she crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. You could have shut me down, she said. You could have dragged me out of that room. And destroyed everything, he replied. The moment I defended myself, it would have become a dispute. He said, she said. Power protecting power. He took a step closer now, cautiously. You didn't just accuse me. You annihilated me. You made it impossible for anyone to doubt your sincerity. The realization hit her in waves, each one colder than the last. The forged documents hadn't been a mistake. They had been bait. They needed to see you as collateral damage, Derek said. Not as an accomplice. Not as someone trying to save herself. They needed to see a woman who had been deceived so completely that she was willing to burn everything. Mia pressed her arms around herself, as if holding in something that threatened to spill out. You planned the timing, she murmured. The gala. The guests. Yes. So many witnesses, she whispered. Too many for it to be contained. He nodded. Credibility scales with exposure. The room felt smaller by the second, the walls pressing in as the puzzle assembled itself with brutal clarity. Every delay, every reassurance, every moment he told her to stay calm. He hadn't been protecting her from the fallout. He had been preparing it. And the FBI? She asked. You knew they'd come to me. I made sure of it, he said. An anonymous tip. Just enough information to force their hand. I knew they'd approach you quietly first. They'd want to see if you broke. And if I had? She demanded. His jaw tightened. Then I would have stopped the plan. That answer didn't comfort her. It horrified her. You were willing to go to prison, she said slowly. To lose everything. Yes. For what? Her voice cracked at the edges. To protect your empire? No, he said. To end it. The words hung there, stark and undeniable. I was done, he continued, with the constant escalation, with the cost, with the inevitability of it. The investigation would have dragged on for years. More damage, more collateral. I wanted a clean ending. She stared at him, disbelief giving way to something dangerously close to awe. So you chose me as the blade. I chose you as the truth, he said. You are the only person who could destroy me and still be believed. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You sacrificed yourself, she said. And you sacrificed me with you. I knew you would survive, he said quietly. How? She demanded. How could you possibly know that? Because you didn't just expose me, he replied. You exposed the system that allowed me to exist. You didn't ask for mercy. You didn't negotiate. You didn't hedge. He met her gaze steadily. They will protect you now. Because you embarrassed them too. The cruelty of it, the elegance of it, made her breath catch painfully. He had played the long game not just against law enforcement, but against public perception itself. She remembered the crowd's faces. The shock. The immediate shift of loyalty. They hadn't seen a woman spiraling. They had seen a reckoning. That smile, she said suddenly, at the end. His lips curved faintly, not in pride but in something like sorrow. That was relief, because it was finally over. Yes. Mia turned away from him, pacing the length of the room, trying to burn off the electricity crackling under her skin. Every step echoed with the weight of what she'd been a part of. You never stopped me, she said. Even when I said things that would haunt you forever. I couldn't, he replied. The truth had to wound. She stopped, gripping the back of a chair until her knuckles went white. Do you have any idea what you took from me? He didn't pretend otherwise. I took your innocence, your certainty, the luxury of moral simplicity. She closed her eyes. And I gave you something in return, he added softly. She laughed bitterly. What could possibly balance this? A future that isn't owned, he said. One where your name stands alone. The silence that followed was thick, trembling. Mia felt as if she were standing at the edge of a vast drop, staring down at the wreckage of the person she used to be. Everything made sense now. And that was the worst part. Because understanding didn't undo the damage. It didn't heal the betrayal. It only illuminated it with ruthless clarity, turning chaos into design. Oh my God, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Derek didn't respond. There was nothing left to explain. The plan had already worked. The arrest didn't happen the way movies teach people to expect it. There were no sirens, no shouted commands. No dramatic takedown on courthouse steps. Derek was taken on a gray morning that looked like every other morning, by men who spoke politely and waited for him to finish his coffee before placing him in handcuffs. Mia wasn't there. She watched it later, once, on a muted television in a quiet hotel room she hadn't realized she'd booked under her own name. The footage showed him walking between two agents, shoulders straight, expression calm. He didn't look at the cameras. He didn't look afraid. He looked finished. She turned the television off before the commentary began. For days afterward, the world felt oddly muffled, as if sound reached her through layers of water. Emails piled up unanswered. Messages from journalists went unread. Friends left voicemails she couldn't bring herself to play. She moved through her apartment on instinct alone, touching familiar objects as if confirming they were still real. The FBI contacted her once more, briefly, procedural, courteous. They thanked her for her cooperation. They told her she wouldn't be charged. They didn't apologize. The art moved quietly, not seized in dramatic raids, not paraded in front of cameras. It simply vanished from warehouses and private vaults and reappeared, months later, in museums across 3 continents. Anonymous donations, silent restitutions, pieces long believed lost returned without explanation. Curators whispered, historians speculated. Mia read about it in industry journals and felt a hollow ache she couldn't quite name. The paintings were where they belonged now. That was supposed to be enough. She returned to the Castellani Gallery on a Tuesday afternoon when the city was loud and indifferent. The security presence was lighter now, stripped back to something that resembled normalcy. Marcus was gone. James too. The gallery felt larger without them, emptier. Felt like hers again. The first client she met with afterward spoke carefully, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. The second was more direct. "You're lucky," he said, not unkindly. "This could have destroyed you." She nodded, accepting the assessment without argument. Professionally, she survived. Her name became shorthand for integrity under fire. Panels invited her to speak about ethics, about vigilance, about the dangers of proximity to power. She declined most of them, accepted a few, chose her words with surgical care. At night she dreamed of the gala. Not the shouting, not the champagne, the silence. Derek standing there, unmoving, while the room tilted irrevocably on its axis. She woke from those dreams with her heart racing, the phantom weight of that moment pressing down on her chest. She never visited him. Letters arrived instead, sparse, thoughtful. He never asked for forgiveness, never explained anything further. He spoke about books he was reading, about time passing differently inside concrete walls. Once, he mentioned a painting he'd always meant to return and never had. She didn't write back. Sometimes, standing alone in the gallery after closing, she caught herself cataloging things the way he had taught her to, quietly, comprehensively, always thinking 2 steps ahead. The realization unsettled her more than anger ever could. She hadn't escaped untouched. The world moved on as it always did. Scandals replaced one another. New villains took center stage. Derek's name faded from headlines, settling into footnotes and case studies. Mia remained, but something essential had shifted. She no longer believed in clean narratives, no longer trusted motives that presented themselves as pure. She saw systems now, how they bent, how they absorbed damage, how they protected themselves even while claiming justice. She also saw herself more clearly, not as a victim, not as a hero, but as someone who had been capable of extraordinary clarity under pressure and extraordinary blindness before it. On quiet evenings, she walked through the gallery slowly, letting her fingers trail just shy of the frames. The art endured. It always did. That thought used to comfort her. Now it simply felt true. There was no victory parade, no catharsis, just the steady accumulation of days, each one carrying a faint residue of what had been lost and what had been learned. She had been humiliated. He had been destroyed. And somewhere in the space between those truths, something irreversible had occurred. Mia locked the gallery and stepped out into the night, the city humming around her, unchanged and endlessly complicated. She walked forward anyway, not healed, not whole, but awake.